All right. So, like we all know, this is the Silver Jubilee 25th session of Salesforce Architect in Making. Today's topic is humble practices, modest but practical tips for architects. And before we get started, I want to just introduce the SAIMA group to everybody. We are a group of people who want to support each other in preparing for the technical architect certification. And we want to share as much knowledge as we can. And we have speakers like Gianluca every time with us to create and share content that will help you prepare for the certification. If you have any ideas that you want to present or you have someone in mind who could present in this forum, just let us know and we will give them the platform to speak about it. But a disclaimer, we are not affiliated with Salesforce in any way, and every content that we present here is our personal opinion. A bit of housekeeping rules before we get started. Please mute yourselves. If you have any questions, suggestions, please ask everything on the chat and I'll make sure we respond to your queries in the same session. Also, we are not perfect or neither we do know everything because we all know Salesforce is vast, technology is vast. We are growing into this whole AI ecosystem from past 1 year. If you spot any mistake, please do let us know and we'll try to improve ourselves. And if you yourself are presenting or anywhere else and you're interested in hosting an event with us, just let us know as well. Now I'll quickly come to the introduction. We have Gianluca with us and he'll shortly introduce himself when he starts. But before that, I'm your host for today. My name is Neha Naguri. I am the co-leader of SAIMA group. I'm also a CTA and I'm based out of Dubai. Also, after the session, we'll be sharing the slides and recording on our YouTube channel, like I mentioned before. And we'll also keep you posted on the topics and the date for the next session on our LinkedIn profile. So please connect with us on LinkedIn, or you can join the meetup group from where you subscribe for this event. Again, thank you so much for joining us for today's event. With that, I will stop sharing, make Gianluca our host, and let Gianluca introduce himself or what wonderful architect he is.
You are too kind. Thank you, Nea.
I'm honest.
Thanks. So, do I need to click share screen? Does it work like that? Okay, let me try that. Just share the full desktop. And let me know if you can see my slides now.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. As a rule, when I was a CTA candidate, I had a timer. So let me start my timer.
One of the first practice of trying to prepare for the certification is time. So cannot agree more to that, Gianluca.
It's still difficult after all the practice.
Yeah, I agree.
So let me present myself. So I'm Gianluca Calcagni. Sorry for the voice. I just recovered from a bad flu. I don't know if I will have the voice for 90 minutes of presentations, but I'm going to try. I got certified in 2021. It was a tough journey, also a journey where I learned a lot. I prepared many slides for CTA candidates in the past. This one is slightly different. It is still definitely good for a CTA candidate, but I wanted to focus more on the practical things that you need to know when you join projects as a technical architect. And the intended audience is junior architects, so solution architects, technical architects, business architects. And for them, I prepared this humble practice. Those are just tips, tips that I learned with experience pretty much. But the first part of the presentation is a bit different. The introduction will be focused more for senior architects. Yes, you can record. I just received a pop-up where I needed to allow recording. That's fine, right? Okay. So the first part of the introduction is more focused on senior architects that had problem with tech debt, in the sense that maybe they work on many projects. Most likely they notice technical debt a bit everywhere. Almost all the projects have some sort of technical debt in a form or another. And they may wonder why, and they may also wonder what they can do about it. So the introduction will be focused more on this topic, and then we will go into the humble practices. Humble practices are not best practices, are just tips, but they can be very helpful. I mean, I apply them pretty much all the time, so I think it will be, and some of them are very hands-on, so I think you will be pleased by some of them. So without further ado, let me share the agenda. So we will start with preamble, then we will share some humble practice about data quality, then security, integrations, and so on until the end of it. By the way, can you hear me well? Is the voice okay? I don't. Okay.
It's good. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So, oh, sorry. Let's acknowledge that. So I'm going to start the presentation with a serious question, and I want you all to think about it. So best practices are always good, and tech debt is always bad, right? So, right? Is that is it true or not? That's the question, and it's a serious one. So let me give you some examples where it's not very clear what it is right and what is wrong. So let's say that for questions of simplicity, you want to follow a declarative design for your solutions. Is that compatible with best practices that follow flexibility instead, or not? Maybe yes, maybe not, but I will show you later. They're not super compatible, honestly. Or let me give you another example. It's about Dutch debt. So let's say that you want to implement B2B commerce. You trust a team of consultants that will be doing the implementation for you. They have some code, but that code does not follow your naming convention for Apex. So if you allow them to do the implementation, you will have two different naming conventions. That's not bad. It's a problem for maintainability. But if you stop them, then you're not growing, or at least you're growing slower. So what do you do? Is it good to have that step in that form or not bad? Um, it's a difficult question. And my point here is that, in my opinion, those questions don't have an answer. They are pointing to real problems that all architects have and require a bit of, it's more of an art than applying knowledge to find out what's the best way to go. And one of the problems is actually the iron triangle. I don't know if you ever heard about this concept. Is a sales concept. Some people use it in project management studies, but essentially what it states is that a project cannot be cheap, fast, and have a great quality altogether simultaneously. Yeah, you can have two maybe, but not all three, the properties. And yeah, this is a project management issue, but it affects your design as an architect, because if you have a low budget, for example, you only have one developer, that's a major decision factor, right? It means that you cannot really apply all the best practice you want. You only have one developer with experience, maybe. Or time to market is another problem. So if you need to go live before the competition, are you able to follow the best practices? Or are you forced to accumulate a bit of church debt? It's honestly difficult. It's very practical. It happens. And so on. If you have a team that is inexperienced, what do you do? If you work in an org that is 10 years old, full of stuff, the cognitive load is enormous. How can you handle that? Are you able to avoid the technical debt or mitigate it or maybe remove it? Those are tough questions, and they are not easily answered. Again, sometimes it's more of an art than anything. The architect needs to apply a bit of an art to solve the problem. Mm. And another point I want to make is this. Some best practices are not truly compatible with some other best practices. So let me give you some examples. So let's say that you want to go all in with declarative design. Again, that is good according to the best practice of simplicity, the value of simplicity. It's bad for flexibility. If you go with the purely declarative design, you would not be very flexible in the kind of solution that you do. Um, if you prefer, I don't know, if you prefer for simplicity to have a separation of concern kind of philosophy in your team, then you are losing reliability because, yeah, then you don't know if the team is well coordinated. Let's say that you want to have a lot of reliability. Let's say you have a cloud solution and you want to scale it so that it is able to handle a peak like the Happy Friday peak. Let's say that it's a B2C commerce implementation and you're dealing with Black Fridays where you have lots and lots of requests simultaneously. And then in order to support reliability, you will prefer horizontal scaling, right? Lots of machines to serve lots of requests. But that goes against vertical scaling. You can have lots of machines that have a strong CPU. But if you don't have a strong CPU, you're not very flexible. Again, you pretty much cannot go all in into one of these values, one of these best practice, simply because you are going to lose something else. And if you neglect some other best practice, you will start accumulating touch debt. And that's pretty much a given in most projects. So going back to the original question, best practices are always good and touch debt is always bad, right? I hope I convince you it's not that simple. It's a gray area. And as an architect, you're an evangelist of the best practices, but sometimes you're called to make a tough choice. Sometimes you are called to choose technical debt in the name of implementing some other best practice that you value the most. But please don't think that I'm giving you the right to choose touch debt freely. That's not what I want to do. Don't go around say, "Oh, Gianluca told me it's okay to accumulate touch debt." No, that's not the lesson here. Um, Sometimes it's legit to accumulate touch debt, but you need to deal with it in the sense that you need to justify your choice. You also need to mitigate because, yeah, you at the very least you want to avoid having long-term issues, or at least trying to postpone the long-term issues as much as possible. So I hope you understand the thematic now, and let me move to the next slide. So this is the iron triangle again. I'm going to explain in detail what kind of debt you are going to accumulate, depending on the kind of project you are. And this is something I don't see very often done when the journey to CTA, but I think it's important. It's especially important if you're a senior architect. So, as we said, you cannot have a cheap, fast, and great project altogether. You can choose two at most. Let's start from the bottom. Let's say that you are on a project that is cheap and fast. Of course, it's mediocre from a quality perspective. And in this kind of project, you will expect lots of pressure, but also the team will be fully doing work and they will have little attention to the details. That's why the quality cannot be great. What is the major risk if you're in a project like that? The major risk is making poor decisions. Decisions that will make maintenance expensive in the long run, and solutions that are suboptimal, maybe hacky, and possibly not scalable. That's the big issue. So let me give you an actual example, a horror story. So let's say you're a technical architect in one of these projects, cheap and fast, and all the developers are busy. They are very busy. They're all overworking pretty much, and the PM is requesting a new resource to manage the workload. And yeah, the business provides a new resource, but this developer is inexperienced. So if you ever was in that situation, you know that an experienced developer is a burden initially. It's not going to help until you scale his skills. Um, so the PM thinks, okay, I'll do this. I will assign an optional user story to this guy. This user story is optional. If he can do it, good. If he cannot, well, not bad. It was optional anyway. So that's the PM thinking, I will use this resource in this way. And you can already think, is this a poor decision or not? But let's stick to it. So let's suppose this guy is able to finish the optional user story is done, is passing testing. And now the project manager thinks, okay, let's develop the deploy to production. It's done, we can do it. What could you do as a technical architect here? In my opinion, you should stick to a North Star, and the North Star should be simplicity. And sometimes the simple thing to do is to not do. Simple as that. I mean, if the story is optional, descope it. Do not deploy to production, even if it is done. It's very likely that it was done with a suboptimal decision, so with a suboptimal solution. So in the moment you deploy to production, you will commit to it. It's going to become touch debt, very likely. Do not do it. Simple as that. What you should avoid in this kind of project is to make concessions. Stick to the simple and try to be a gatekeeper. And recap. So cheap and fast projects, major risk, poor decision. You should expect technical debt in maintenance and in the kind of solutions that you provide. You fight that by using simplicity as a best practice or as a value for the entire project. And let's move on. Next quadrant, let's say on the right side, you are in a project that is great, as in high quality, fast, it must be deployed quickly. What you can expect are this is going to be very pricey for the business. The business has huge expectations. And in order to meet the deadline, you will be paralyzed as much as possible. So you have many moving parts. What is the major risk here? Major risk is chaos. It's chaotic. It's the typical chaotic project. And the chaos will create technical debt, but it will not be in the solution design. It will be in the release management, deployments. The governance will be probably weak if you don't have a good project manager, for example. You will have undetected dependencies. Think of a developer building a validation rule, and the validation rule is blocking integration that is managed by another team. That's the typical example. And let me tell you an horror story again. So you are in this project, you are the technical architect, and you need to implement Sales Cloud and Service Cloud. And let's say that the team is split in two streams. They're independent, and they also want the code base to be independent because that makes less interference between each other. And when you move into integration testing, you start to see that the testers are hitting governor limits exceptions all the time. Why? Because nobody was tracking the governor limits. That's the problem. They were separation of concerns. They were just dealing with their part. So what can you do to avoid this? Choose as your North Star reliability in the sense of scalability, availability. Try to avoid lack of constraints. For example, teams that want to be separated from the other, teams that do not want to coordinate. Try to avoid that. Put a constraint on people. For example, here you could say to each team, either you communicate sooner, or you start integration testing sooner, or you prove to me that you do not consume more than 50% governor limits each team only 50%. Those are constraints, but those are the kind of constraints that will give you more reliability. So be an enforcer. And Memento, in this kind of project, technical debt will not be in the solution. It will be in the governance, in the release management, and so on, in the kind of things that are a bit harder to detect. And now let's move to the final part, the left quadrant here. So suppose that you are in kind of project that is cheap, but expects great quality. Like this could be, if you're an ISV, this could be an app exchange product. Or if you're a normal customer, maybe this is a maintenance kind of project where you collaborate with sales ops and you keep building stories. Now, the kind of things that happens here is that the business will try to avoid making failing decisions. Usually they go with an empirical approach, and then based on the results, they have sudden changes of heart. That's the typical thing that happens. And the major risk becomes procrastination. So key decisions that are not made, like maybe you need to retire something because it's just technical debt, and the business keeps avoiding making the decision, making the call, because they think, oh, maybe somebody's still using it. Maybe, maybe we should not just remove something just because we don't know what it does. And technical debt will be accumulated even here. It will cause scope creeping, unclear vision, inconsistent design. Even cosmetically, you may have a different styling on different pages, features that are repeated, and key decisions that are not done. So, final horror story. So let's say that you are a technical architect here, you are talking with the product owner, and the product owner would like to receive recommendations about what's the best integration approach for the project. And you have no clue because the project is in the long run, the key decisions have not been made. So let's say that you recommend scalability. You say scalability is important. I recommend platform events. Platform events are the state of the art in scalability. And you convince the product owner, you start building a cloud server using Apache Kafka, a strong middleware that is able to handle platform events with easy. And then it happens that all the integrations that are actually requested by the business must be in real time, because it happens, because real-time integrations are good. I mean, they provide the best engaging factor for customers, and sometimes that's just the only way to go. So let's suppose that's the case. You build middleware that is able to handle platform events, but then you don't use them. You only create synchronous integrations. Yeah, I'm sorry to say that what you did is you created touch debt. Because if you have a very wonderful state-of-the-art implementation that doesn't solve any business need, that's technical debt. It's just a cost over the business that is not doing anything. What you should have done instead, you should have chosen as a North Star flexibility. So in this case, choose the most boring solution, that is a normal ESB, capable of doing a bit of everything. You don't know exactly what will be needed by the business, but you will cover it anyway. And what you should avoid is to make choices that are irreversible. Like, again, choosing scalability when you don't know if scalability is a thing for this project. So be a safeguard. I hope I was able to explain to you what are the things that you should focus on as an architect when you are in this kind of project. You see here that the project management concept, like the iron triangle, should have an effect also on your architecture. And specifically, if you need to choose technical debt, choose the right kind of technical debt. Don't choose the wrong one. Let's move on. Next slide here is about the pitfalls. So there are some pitfalls that will generate technical debt for sure. And I want you to be able to recognize it. So I prepared this slide for you. The first one is about tactical tornadoes. You may say, what is a tactical tornado? It's a term that I borrowed from a book. A tactical tornado is a person, usually a developer. It's the kind of developer that prefers quick wins. It will just try to finish as soon as possible. This is the kind of guy that will duplicate the code instead of refactoring it because it's faster, and they will choose tactical approaches all the times. But of course, they are tornadoes. By choosing only tactical approaches, you will create tons of touch debt. These kind of guys, they move fast. Sometimes they're actually complimented by the business for being fast, but they are not good for the project in the long term. And tactical tornadoes are not only just developers. I met tactical tornadoes that were managers that had the motto, I don't care how it's done, I want it now. That's, if you ever met a manager like that, you know that yes, they get things quickly, but it's full of problems. The Salesforce orgs become unmanageable after 1 year or two. So be aware, recognize the pitfall. If you're dealing with a person like that, you will need to fight the mindset. Do not fight the person, but fight the mindset of the person. Try to explain why they cannot reason tactically only. They need strategy, they need best practices. A second pitfall, code smells. As an architect, you will be able to smell problems in the code sometimes. If you're not, it's okay. You can delegate to dev lead. The important thing, though, is that you constantly try to search for problems, and that's the thing. And when you see that the problems are too much, the code smell is unbearable, yeah, that's time for a refactory. So do not ignore the problem of the code smells. Third factor, Frankensteins. What is a Frankenstein? I just made up the term, but Frankenstein is a solution that combines two different technologies, like a flow with Apex inside, or a batch that is doing callouts, an approval process with future methods. You can combine as many technologies as possible in Salesforce. It's a feature, but it doesn't mean that it's not technical debt. That's what I'm trying to make you think about. I'll give you an example from my experience. I was called once to implement a complex approval process. It was too complex for simple standard approval process. We needed a bit of Apex. So I was talking with the solution architect, and the solution architect proposed a very nice solution. He said, yes, we will use a custom object to replicate the approval screen. Then we will have Apex to do the heavy calculations. And then Apex will be calling a standard approval process so that you make the solution maintainable with queues and stuff. So on paper, it was perfect, on paper. And we made it perfect. In the end, we were able to tame the Frankenstein. But what I didn't realize initially is that it was touch debt for a long time, in the sense that if you think of it, a kind of solution that is mixing different technologies has many points of failure. So in my case, I had a custom object that is a point of failure if you have bad data. Then Apex, that is a point of failure if the code is not well done. And then you had a standard approval process. That's another point of failure if the entry criteria is wrong or the conditions are wrong. So essentially, Frankenstein can be helpful, but they require a lot of debugging. So if you see lots of Frankensteins, it's a pitfall. You are probably accumulating touch depth. They can be helpful, but you need to add time to debug them. That's the problem. And finally, final pitfall is our happy paths. Um, of course, the happy path is not a pitfall, but only thinking about happy path. That's the pitfall. In my experience, I use as a rule of thumb a 10% failure rate for happy paths. And when they happen, they will happen all clustered together. Like you can have 900 happy paths working fine, happy 900 occurrences fine, and then suddenly 100 occurrences all ending badly, because that's how they work. They once you change slightly the conditions, yeah, you start having lots of issues altogether. That's the problem with happy paths. They look fine initially, but do not fall for that. They will fail. They fail, and when they fail, they will fail in clusters. That's the problem. Those are the pitfalls. What can you do about it? You can enjoy some humble practice. So first of all, if you choose to have touch depth, document it. It's mandatory. You need to explain why you're choosing it, elaborate the risk and costs, and consider mitigation strategies to postpone paying the price as much as possible. Importantly, do not just state that you have touch depth. Recommend when you want to remove it. That's a bit of a hard part, because you say, okay, even if I choose a touch depth, when do I need to really remove it? It's difficult to say, but you should at least try. And finally, do not just document it, track it in Jira or whatever project management tool you're using. Even if it's just in the backlog, at least it's visible to the business. They know that it's there. Maybe they will postpone it. But if you have a timeline for removal, then they will feel compelled to action it at some point. So this is the first humble practice. Second is always promote the best practice first. You should be an evangelist of best practices. It's important. And know some of the tips that I'm going to show you later in the next slides. And finally, know how to design defensively. What do I mean by that? If you choose a design that doesn't care about errors, it may work, but it will be less stable respect to solution design, that at least it's trying to mitigate errors in some form or another. It's acknowledging, design can acknowledge the presence of errors, and they can try to do something about it. Even if it's just a small thing, designing defensively helps a lot. It's one of the most important tools that you may have. So this was just the introduction. I'm going to move into actually some of these humble practices. Let me see how much time I've left. Okay, I don't have much time left, sorry. So I'll go quick, sorry. I will not show every single one, but I'm going to show you at least some of them. So I want to focus on this one, the fourth. Create a bypass automation setting. What is it? It's a custom setting, sometimes a custom metadata, sometimes a custom permission. Doesn't matter. What matters is that you should be able to flag a user as a user that can bypass automations, like automations such as validation rules and or triggers and or flows. And this is key, especially for migrations. If you need to migrate data, you really don't want the triggers or the validation rules from stopping you. At the same time, you do not want to deactivate all of them, because business user will be affected if you deactivate them. So all you want is that specific users can bypass the automations. And usually are system users, batch users, integration users. Those are the kind of users where you really want to bypass automations. So this is one important humble practice. Next one is this. This is a bit theoretical, but I think it's very useful. If they ask you to model a business entity, for example, the orders, ask how many life cycle this entity has. What do I mean by life cycle? So let's suppose it's actually that you need to model orders. If you think of it, orders have two life cycles. One is external, the one that you show to the customers, that is pending order, shipped order, completed order, something like that. And then it has a second life cycle that is internal, is about fulfilling the order. So you will have looking for carrier, looking for procurement orders, and so on. So things that you do not want to show to the external users, to the customers, but you require because internally you need to fulfill the order. Those are two different life cycles. This is just a simple example, but it's an important example because Salesforce itself has two concepts of orders for this reason. One is the sales order that is used externally. The other is the work order that is used internally for service kind of fulfillments. Salesforce has an entire package, is the order management package, just to, if you really want to go in depth into orders. But the point I want to make is this: the life cycle of data matters. Ask for the life cycle. If you see different life cycles, you need probably to model the object, the entity into multiple objects. It's not one custom object, it may be two or three, depending on how many life cycles you need. That's a key tip I want you to know. Moving on to the next slide. Here I want to show you a bit more about defensive design. For example, this is simple, but it's defensive. You know, the Salesforce provides you with 5 integration licenses for free. So please use them. Create a batch bot that you only use for batch jobs, and create a migration bot that you only use for migration. In which sense this is defensive? It's defensive because it will allow you to audit actions. You will be able to know who did something. If you don't have a special users for batch jobs and migration jobs, it's a problem for auditing perspective. So just because you have them, you help audit, and that makes it defensive for this reason alone. And it's a simple trick, and it's for free, so please do that. And let me tell you one more, about the batch jobs. Batch jobs are hard. They are extensive. They consume CPU cycles extensively. So if you can help them, help them. If you can bypass triggers in batch jobs, do it, because that will make the batch job faster. If you really need to apply some part of the triggers, just call them from the batch job. You can calculate the end state, how you want the data to be, and then you insert it how you want it to be without triggers editing it. This is important because I don't know if you ever met trigger cascade, like a contact trigger calling the account trigger that calls opportunity triggers. It happens a lot, but it's a nightmare to debug, especially in a batch job. So try to use this tip. If it makes sense, just avoid triggers in a batch job, just bypass them. Moving on, next slide, about security. The first tip I want to tell you is this. When you deal with profiles, permission set groups, custom permissions, it becomes unmanageable. It's explosively not scalable. And it will be extremely hard to understand why a user can or cannot see something. One trick that helps is naming convention. It's really mandatory. Do not skip naming convention for profiles, permission set, and so on. It's the most basic form of defense that you have against explosive complexity. Another tip I want to share is here, this one. Visually hidden is different than inaccessible. So what do I mean by that? So let's say that you receive a user story. They require you to hide a field from the page. Now, you have two ways to go. One is that you remove the field from the page layout. The second is you make the field invisible in the field level security or on the profile level. One is about hiding visually, the other is about making it inaccessible. So sometimes the business will not care about the difference, but you are an architect, you care. Because if you make a mistake, users will exploit it. So if you remove a page from a page layout, but the business wanted it to make inaccessible, it means that the users will be able to see the field and reports in list views, in related lists. It's you're not if you don't understand this difference, you will not be able to fulfill the user story. Same for editability. And importantly, it's important to understand the difference between a UI restriction and an API restriction. And this is really fundamental from a security perspective. You know, I judged many CTA candidates. Sometimes they recommend external objects to solve a problem, like archival of data to make it accessible in the community. But as you know, external objects do not support sharing. It's all or nothing. And when I tell the candidate, how do you solve the problem? They usually tell me, okay, I keep the external object, but I will remove the tab of the external object and I will create a LWC where I filter the data. I don't know why the most candidates will think like that. They are thinking about UI restrictions. Now, if I am your judge, you failed security with me because I can tell you all I need as a user to extract the data is to open data loader. So your UI restriction, your recommendation is exploitable very easily. So please, as a for CTA candidates, this is important. Try to really interiorize this difference between UI restriction and API restriction. Of course, API restriction is better, almost always. And do not expect your users to be stupid. They know how to hack the system. Some people do. I've seen it firsthand. So do not just take the easy route here. Next slide. Here I'm recommending a more proactive approach. So I'll go quick here. I will just tell you this. Just two things. One is that if you have a sandboxes, you probably do, use a login flow to show a message. This is a sandbox. The message is, this is a sandbox, only shown on sandboxes. This is simple, but it helps the business. They don't know the difference between production and a sandbox. If you have this login flow, you avoid a lot of issues of people that by mistake, they commit production data in a sandbox and they think they're done. Well, it happens. It happens for real. And second is, as an architect, you are the guy that should check the health, the release updates, and should use the org optimizer. Those are three tools for architects. Use them proactively, like monthly or sprint based, but use them. They are there for you. So it's a simple tip, but it's an important tip. Moving on to the next slide. Now we're changing the subject. We're dealing into integrations now. And one key things I want to explain is the concept of bumpy roads as an alternative to happy paths. And to explain that, I'm going to show you, give me a second, I need to Um, uh, I need to change the tab. How do I change tab here? Ah, yeah. Do you know how I can remove this? I cannot click the tab because I have the meeting open, the meeting toolbar open here. Give me a second, I will stop sharing and then go back. Okay. Okay, I think you can see now. So I'm going to show you the difference between a happy path and a bumpy road. So let's say that you are orchestrating this integration where an ETL is querying data from Salesforce. It creates the data in SAP, and then it takes the SAP number, put it back into Salesforce. Simple as that. This is the happy path, right? It's maybe the only thing that you can do in case of errors is to log it in the ETL. Maybe that's the only login thing that you considered. There are other ways. Happy path, as I mentioned, is going to fail very often. So try to use bumpy roads instead. A bumpy road will consider if a step is failing and it will provide some other action, and then it will go back where it started. So you see that the bumpy roads, this is really a bump, it goes back to where it started. So in this case, if the data is not retrievable from Salesforce, try to retrieve from something else. If SAP is given a failure, well, try again. And if you're not able to save the SAP number in Salesforce, at least save the error message. So those are bumps. It makes the design a bit more defensive. And importantly, it's not a multi-path kind of integration. Multi-paths are problematic for testing because you need to test every combination of paths. It's very hard. Bumpy roads are not like that. You see, what you need to do is to test the worst case scenario, and then you go back to the happy path again. You need to test all the bumps, and that's enough. That's the why bumpy roads are a bit easier, because from a testing perspective is just that you need to test once there, and you need to test the worst case scenario. So please use it. Use this concept. I'm not saying that you should consider every step as a failure and create a bump for every single step, but at least know that it's a possibility. You can make the design a bit more defensive by using bumpy roads. So this is one. Now, the second integration practice I want to share with you is how to use external keys, especially when you're dealing with different systems. So in order to do that, I need to stop sharing again. Give me a second. So I went over time. I failed my CTA review part. I was kind of expecting that. Luckily, we have more time later. So let me stop sharing, change tab, and then I'll reshare again. Okay, I think you can see. So the topic is how do you handle external keys when you have multiple systems? So I made an example for you. So let's say that you're dealing with accounts with prospects. And usually Salesforce is the system of records for prospects, usually. So that means that Salesforce has the Salesforce ID as the main key, but you also need the data in SAP, and you also need the data in the enterprise data warehouse. And SAP is using the SAP number as the main key. The data warehouse is creating a global UUID, doesn't matter, it's using a different key. So what is the best way to handle keys? It's like this. If Salesforce is your system of record, Salesforce should have all the other external keys So you see here that it contains a reference to the SAP number and the global UID. And the other systems should just have one external key to Salesforce, because Salesforce is the system of record. And that's the best, well, in my opinion, that's the simplest way to manage external keys. I feel that most of the times this is enough. When it is not enough, when you need a master data management tool, when you need something like that, yes, this is not this is not viable anymore. But usually you don't need that. Usually it's okay to just use external keys with a few integrations. So if you need to choose how to do it, try to see who is the system of record and then handle the keys in this way. Let's move on. Integration. This is still integration is more defensive now. You know what are audit fields in Salesforce, right? Like last modified date, last modified by. Those are audit in the sense that they help you understand who did what. It helps you also troubleshooting. And you know that you can create custom fields, custom audit fields yourself. I mean, it's just two fields, right? One is the a lookup to user, in this case is the last sync request by, and the other is a date time field, so last sync request date. And for each integration that matters, you can create custom audit fields that you keep in sync, and also a last sync completion date that will tell you when the syncing in this case was successful. By using these three custom fields that you build yourself, you're pretty much able to troubleshoot integrations. It's not something I expect you to do all the times, but this is very helpful when you have an external system syncing data into Salesforce. If you want to know if this syncing is happening fine, then audit fields like this help, because you can check the request date, when the sync was supposed to be, the completion date, and then you can use a report, you can run a report, compare the two dates, then you know all the data that was not synced. It can be helpful. It's not for every single integration where you need this, but some integrations are important, and this is defensive because you can see if the integration is not working as expected. So for the sake of time, I'm going to move the next slide that is about governance. And here, the tip is, it's a theoretical tip. Assign ownership to everything. Ownership / accountability / responsibility. What I mean by this is that if something is important, there should be one person that is responsible for keeping that thing alive. That's what I'm trying to say. So processes are important, business processes, compliance processes. Activities are important, like deployments, data loads. Systems, of course, Salesforce is important, the SAP is important, and data. So that means that everything here should have an owner. So usually, owner of a business process is sales ops, owner of deployment is the release manager, owner of Salesforce is a product owner or generic business owner. The owner of the health of Salesforce is the technical architect. So everything should have an ownership. Governance is all about ownership. So just by having this concept in your mind, you know that you can avoid a lot of technical debt, because at the moment that something is important, you don't want that to fail. You want that to be kept alive and in good shape. Just assign a person that owns it. Simple as that. It's what makes governance effective. And I'm going to skip this and go to the next one. This is about development life cycle. I'll give you just two tips about it. One is about personal developer sandboxes. If you have a team of 5 developers, I recommend that you create 5 developer sandboxes for them. one for each person. Each person inherits one personal sandbox only for them, and they can use it to save code, to do experimentations, to check what happens when they migrate data. This is very important if you have lots of packages. If you do, then Scratch orgs are not very easy to manage. A developer sandbox is a bit more suited in that case, in my opinion. Some developers will not use their personal developer sandbox, but the ones that use it, they will find it extremely helpful. And it doesn't cost anything. So just create a personal developer sandbox for each developer in your team. I'm going to skip to the next slide. This is about non-functional requirements. I'm going to show you just one, the first one. If you have 5 stages on your opportunity, so in this example, maybe you have qualification, discovery, proposal, negotiation, and then closed, won, or lost. What I recommend that you do is that you assign a number to each stage. So in order, so qualification will be 20, discovery 40, and so on. And what's the purpose? What's the purpose of this? The purpose is that it helps a lot. So let's say that you get a requirement from the business and they want the phone number to be mandatory when you are in discovery stage on an opportunity. And then you may think, okay, I'll create a validation rule. When the stage is discovery, then phone number cannot be blank. Simple as that. But if you think of it, that's not really solving the problem. What the business wants is that the phone number is there from discovery on, from that point on. They will need that phone number even in proposal or negotiation phase. So what you should have done instead is you should have created a validation rule and put there when opportunity stage number is 40 or above, phone number cannot be blank. That should have been the actual validation rule. So that's why having just this numerical sorting helps a lot in understanding and also in implementing valid validation rules and valid processes. I'm going to spend some time on this last point. It's very simple, but very effective. If you have a user story, put a reference of the user story in the description of the field or the description of the Apex code or whatever piece of component you are developing, put there a reference to the Jira story. Not only that, put a semantic definition and a purpose. So it should be, I think descriptions are extremely important. If you don't do this, you will start losing dependencies. You will start losing context. And as you know, losing dependencies is always bad. It's a form of touch debt. Final slide. I think I only have time for one of these, so let me go. I'm going to show you a defensive design for non-functional requirements, and it's a very simple one. So let's say that you have a trigger, and the trigger sometimes will show an error message. What you should do defensively is to convert the error message in a user-friendly error message. What you never do is to silence the error. If you silence it, you lose knowledge that you had a problem in the first place. It's the worst thing you can do. Some developers will use a try catch to catch every possible error. It's a kind of easy way of going, but it's bad. When you have a try catch, the catch should not silence the exception, should just rework it in a user-friendly way. So this is defensive, of course, because it's able to show you errors when they are, and it's able to show you errors in a way that helps the business. In that way, it is defensive. So sorry for question of times, I'm stopping here, but you can ask me more during the Q&A. So as a conclusion, so I'm going back to slideshow. So a conclusion, you could choose technical depth to accumulate it. It's a legit choice. It's legit, but you need to repay it. That's not possible to avoid. You need to repay the touch debt. Um, Sometimes if you're choosing best practice, the wrong best practice, even if you implement it correctly, will create touch debt. You need to choose. Best practices are a trade-off. If you focus on one, you will neglect another. You cannot have the best of the worlds because we live in a world with limited resources. So be careful which best practice you think is the right best practice. There are some tips and tricks like the ones in this set of slides that I will share with you that can help. They're not best practices, but I think you can tell that it can help a lot. You just need to apply them and consider when using them. And finally, always try to find a solution design that is defensive. If you have a chance, try to mitigate dirty data, errors, misuse by incorporating problems into the design in a way that you're able to either expose the mistakes or maybe or mitigate or maybe just fix it. Sometimes it's possible to fix the mistakes directly in your design. So this is my conclusion. Sorry for going over time. Thank you all and never stop learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gianluca. It was really an insightful session, and I hope everybody was able to relate with the examples that you just presented with their um, personal projects. And if anybody who's really starting their architecture journey, they'll be able to streamline their role and be able to understand what ownership they should be able to take and how they will be able to go defensive, right, as you say it. So it was really, really insightful, at least for me. If from our audience, if anybody has any questions, we can take them up. Otherwise, Gianluca is there on LinkedIn. Everybody can connect to him and feel free to ask questions for him. Anybody going once, two, three? Okay. I believe everybody was very clear, and really it was insightful. And thanks again, Gianluca. I know you're not feeling well. You're sick with the flu, and you still were able to make it to our session. So again, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you for having me. Is my second presentation here, and I'm very happy to be back. So thank you for giving me the chance.
Just to Gianluca. Okay. With that, I will close up this session and